Grumble, grumble. We've got the event all set up. We flip the page over and it routes us to some more rule explanation. So let's go ahead and take a look at the book again. It's a little frustrating that it keeps bouncing us back and forth, but I think I am learning the rules, at least, so it's got that going for it. Chapter 3 on how an attack is made. Chapter 7, 8, and 12. Good God. Okay. Let's get the old trusty rule book back out. All right, so here they're covering the attack timeline. This stuff is actually probably very important. On almost every turn, a hero's main action is the attack. With the attack damage, heroes get their enemies closer to death, and via its effects, they change the circumstances of battle in their favor. Plan ahead. All right, before you allow the number of steps in the attack timeline to intimidate you, rest assured that in the vast majority of cases, this is how you will spend your prime action. You'll choose an attack card from your hand, select a suitable target within range, roll a die and compare it to the result of that target's defense. One of the things I really like about this system is that there's just enough rolling and not too much. You know, like Shadows of Brimstone, for example, borders on being, or possibly goes way fucking over the border on, good God, how much rolling is there in this game? And tallying stuff up and whatnot. This one, you throw one die and that tells you if it worked or not. If you roll lower than the enemy's defense, you miss and you deal your residual damage. If you roll equal or higher, you hit and you apply the attack damage to your target as well as the effects. Sometimes complex situations may demand knowledge of the order of steps you and your opponent have to follow. And for that, follow the timeline and sections ahead. So, yeah, there's a lot of detail here, and I don't know how far into it we necessarily need to go, but let's just keep going. All right, so your hero attack timeline, as we said, you've got the declaration phase where you select a card or you decide to do a basic attack. You activate that card's benefit or drawback if it has one. You declare the target. Yeah, check its description, check its range, and check its vision. If it's a ranged attack, villains might react. Then you move into the strike phase. So in this phase, you're just getting ready to attack. You pick your target and your ability. And if you have benefits that trigger prior to the attack, then you activate them. In the strike phase, you roll the die, you apply your modifiers. So if you're mobbing the enemy, which we'll talk about here in a minute, if you've got items or bonuses that maybe increase your percentage, your chance to hit, as you do with the basic attack. You know, when you do your basic attack, you get +1 to your hit. I think it's +1. +1? No, I don't remember. I think it's +1. And then, still within the strike phase, you check the final result, hit or miss. So if you hit, you're rolling equal to or higher to, that's very important, to the target's defense. You apply your passive power if it's triggered, and then you apply the attack damage to the target hit. If you miss, that means you rolled lower than the target's defense, and basically nothing else happens in the strike phase. Then you move to the execution phase where you apply the additional effects. So if at least one strike hit, if available, you may apply in any order your weapon's active power. You know, for example, the long sword here has an active power plus 5 damage. And or your attack card's effects in the order listed in the card. So you have to work down the card. If all of your strikes missed, you apply the effect in the attack card's miss field, which is almost always just going to be does some residual damage or heals, you know, if it's a healing spell. Then if it was a special attack, you remove or apply the card. So if it's one of the gold cards, these are one-time use per quest. So you either remove it because it's gone, or if it has an ongoing effect, you put it on to the enemy that you affected with it so that you remember that the effect is active. And if it's a primary card, you flip it over, or you do the same thing. You give it to the enemy to track the status effect. And then you apply the death consequences if combatants dropped to 0 after the strike phase and the attack is considered resolved. So that sounds complicated, but it's really pretty simple. And we'll see that as we play through. Yeah, one thing that's important to note here, if your attack has multiple strikes, as they call it, which means multiple targets, then you restart that strike phase until all the strikes are determined either a hit or a miss. So that means that you roll for each bad guy, and so your attack could miss one person but hit another and still apply its effects and whatnot. Here it goes into more very specific detail. Declaration of attack. This spends your prime action. You declare an attack if it will enter the strike phase. So that means you can't declare an attack if there's nothing to target, basically. So if you can't get to the point where you're rolling against someone's defense, then you can't do the target. And why would you want to do that? Well, because a lot of these cards have benefits that you might want to activate. You might want to like shield yourself 3 or something, but the ability requires you to attack somebody. So you say, oh, I'll just attack this shrub over here, you know, so you can't like fake buff yourself basically, or cheat buff yourself. If after declaring an attack and applying its benefit drawback, you verify that you cannot declare a valid target, unspend your prime action, recover the card that you have used, and undo all other actions, including benefits. So what they're saying there is some of these cards will let you, like the benefit will be that you can move. So if you think that by activating the benefit, if activating the benefit will get you to the point where you can land the strike, then you can do it. That's the exception to the rule where you can't attack if there's nothing to hit. So like, for example, my boy here, I want to say, yeah, he's got this ability, Shipwreck Blow. It's got a range of 1 square, targets 1 enemy, and the benefit is you move 3. So if he was, what's his average movement? 6. If he was 8 squares away, he wouldn't be able to hit with the ability because it requires adjacency, and he technically wouldn't have the movement to get to where he needs to be. But he could move his 6 and then activate the ability after selecting a target that he will end up next to as a result of the benefit. Benefits are optional, drawbacks are mandatory. After you've declared your attack and executed its benefit or drawback, you must declare who you will attack, and it must be a valid target. Target is valid when it matches the description in the attack card. That's, you know, that's basic information, or if it's here, it's for the enemies, it's their targeting priority. And you can see it within a proper distance. So if it's a range attack, they have to be within 8. You cannot declare an invalid target. To be valid, a target must match the description in the card of the declared attack. For example, you cannot target an ally if the attack card target description states one enemy. Multiple targets. Remember to declare your target before rolling the strike. Since combatants have different defenses, cheaters will try to see how high they roll before revealing who they are targeting. Yeah, so you don't want to cheat. You want to say, I'm going to attack him first and then him with this, what would be a very large AoE attack. And then roll separately. Range is how far your attack can go. If the number of squares between yourself and the target is equal to or lower than the number in your attack range, the target is within a valid distance. Ranged, so melee attacks, you have to be adjacent. You do have some that you can be 1 or 2 away from, like a spear throw or something. My guy here, Herodotus, has a couple of those. And then you've got ranged attacks, which you may be up to 8 away. So you could be adjacent to somebody and do a ranged attack. And then you have vision as the third prerequisite. Only barriers block this line. So walls and doors are the only thing that block the vision line. So, and you draw it from the edge of the enemy square to the edge of to any edge of the combatant square. And if you can draw a straight line without crossing over a wall or a door or a closed door, then you're good. So like in this case, it might not look like it, but I believe she would have line of sight to him, because from that corner to that corner. And I've got my little laser pointer. I can even show you that. See? Very, very cool. Yeah, determining vision, trace an imaginary straight line from the corners of your square. Can't cross the edges of squares occupied by walls or doors, not even graze through a corner. So like her, she wouldn't have line of sight on him. She does because the outer edge of her square doesn't need to cross the door. Yeah. And the 3D terrain might kind of obscure that a little bit, but trust me, we're good on that. Let me give you some examples here. Then it goes into the more detail on the strike phase. That's the attempt to hit the target. It's when you roll the die. So you declare the target and then you do the strike phase. Roll the die, apply the result modifiers. A natural 20 is always a hit, and a natural 1 is always a miss. So even if you have a bonus to your roll, like +3, hit, and you roll a 1, you miss. Conversely, if your enemy has 25 defense and you roll a 20, you hit him no matter what. It lists out the most common roll modifiers. You've got your bonus to roll, sometimes from your attack benefit, from blessed, the condition, which lets you roll twice and then choose the best number. There's certain terrain, the altar blesses the attacker, and then items can buff your attack too. Penalties to roll usually come from drawbacks, cursed condition, or distracted condition. And the most common defense modifiers are the protected condition for a bonus and the exposed condition for a penalty. Mobbing and focus exposes the target. And that mobbing and focus is when you, I really don't want to have to, yeah. So it's basically when you're adjacent to the enemy, when 2 or more characters are adjacent to the enemy but not to each other. So if you're like that, he has to split his focus between you, right? He's like, oh God, oh no. If you're right here, he can keep his eyes on both of you at the same time, right? But if you're here, or here, so forth and so on. Then he's mobbed. And when they're mobbed, they get a -3 to their roll. They become exposed, which gives them a -3 to their defense. Is the way I should have said that. And then focusing is, and so that's a benefit for melee combatants, obviously. The ranged version of that is focusing, where you can give up your movement for the turn to focus on, to really like, all right, I get you, like really aim your bow, and the villain becomes exposed from that as well. And they have some nice diagrams of that stuff. And then, yeah, if the strike hits, they just note that passive powers for a lot of enemies, a lot of heroes will trigger at the point that the strike hits. Yeah, see, it says here, first hit of your turn. So his passive brutality, if no ally is within one range of the target on the first hit of your turn, then you gain a mana and move an ally too. And they go into a little bit more detail. I don't really know that we need to worry about this too much. Applying death consequences. This is kind of a funny way of saying this. Isn't the consequence death? Let's say I have an attack timeline, i.e. before the strike phase begins or after an execution phase. Combatants that drop below 1 hit point immediately die. So that means if you move on a terrain and it kills you, you're dead. You're immediately. If you die as a result of an attack, as we covered earlier, you don't actually die until the whole thing is resolved. So to give you an example, if Tide of Blades hits a target with 2 hit points, that target's hit point token drops to slot 0 of the HP track, but the figure remains on the grid. You can still move it with the attack's effect so that you can deal damage to other enemies who become adjacent to the still living target. And so the effect of Tide of Blades is you may move the target up to 7 squares, then all enemies now adjacent to the target take 3 damage each. So that's it. That's nice. It just means that you don't get penalized for landing the killing blow. That would actually be a really shitty feeling. And I think it shows a lot of maturity of game design that they actually thought about that, you know, and adjusted for it. So that's chapter 3. Like 4 other chapters we need to look into. All right, so next up we're looking at chapter 7. It's interesting. I'm in the position where this has never happened before because my channel is tiny and meaningless, but it's kind of stirring up a little bit of discussion on the Tanares RPG Facebook group about the nature of the tutorial and if it's overly complicated and whatnot. I just want to reiterate again for everybody, I haven't made a judgment on this game yet because I've barely played it. I love everything I've seen with the sole exception of what is inarguably a pretty kind of convoluted tutorial to teach to play. I mean, it's bad enough when it's just me sitting at the table. I can't even imagine trying to take a group of people through this tutorial. Who is gonna sit there and read all this shit, you know? But no judgment on the game. I'm in love with the game already, and I barely even scratched the surface. That said, we're moving on to chapter 7, the villains. Gives you the villain card breakdown. We've talked about that before. We don't need to cover it again. Yeah, their stats are always 5 and the move is always 8, but that's on the card, so you don't need to worry about trying to remember that, which I love. Again, that's something that they could have easily let slip and just expected people to remember, and that would have been a big mistake. So on the villain's turn, in order of importance, villains want to attack their favorite target, move as little as possible, and take the least possible amount of damage while meeting these higher priorities. So that one sentence honestly encapsulates the all you need to know about like the AI of the villains. It's super simple. They want to attack the person that they're trying to attack. And if they can't, they just go to the next person, the next closest person who meets that criteria, right? And they'll just go down the line through the heroes. They want to take the shortest path. And that means that they will put themselves into dangerous situations. These are not, you know, strategic geniuses. They're freaking reapers. They just want blood and want blood on their sides. And then they'll take the safest path. So they won't willingly throw themselves into fire. But if they have to get to their preferred target by the shortest path, then they will. So if you know that, to be honest, you kind of know how it's easy to suss out how they'll operate. In terms of favorite targets, yeah, so the red villains are always going to target the hero with the highest hit points, the closest hero with the highest hit points. So, and I might have said that wrong. I want to make sure I get that right. The hero with the highest hit points within reach. Yeah, I didn't read that last part. That's the key. Again, it's not just the hero with the highest hit points. If I'm over here, he's not coming for me here. He's going for between these two who has the highest hit points. So that's easy enough. The green guys always target the hero with the most mana within reach. The within reach is the key to the whole system. It really simplifies it if you just keep that in mind. Orange enemies go for the hero with the lowest hit points within reach, and blue enemies target the farthest hero within reach. And if there's a tie in the priority and in the distance, you know, then the players get to choose the target. Yes, so they activate kind of similar to the heroes anyways. They determine their target. They're looking for their favorite target, highest hit points for Johnny Red Guy. And they're trying to figure out if they're reachable. So they're taking into account movement impairing terrain tiles like runes and ice, but they're not taking into account damage they may take along the way. They do that later. That's the final step, the safest path. So for the targeting and the shortest path, they're not factoring in if it's dangerous or not. If even after moving the villain would not reach its favorite target, repeat the process with a second favorite and so on until a reachable target is found. So this is what keeps you from being able to just kite these guys, you know, across the map, basically. And what happens is if they can't reach any heroes, then they'll do what's called a dark surge. And they'll talk about that in a bit. But it's basically they take a little bit of damage and then they move again, and they go back through the process. So remember, they're trying to get to the favorite. They're trying to move as little as possible, and that's probably built into the AI, because otherwise it would be really easy to game with the reaction system. You could trick it into doing all sorts of stupid shit, like moving in between two guys, they both get reaction hits, you know. The shortest as possible will hopefully mitigate the likelihood of that, because they're not just going to go charging around the map. And then finally, in priority, they'll move as safely as possible. So if multiple paths tie is the shortest, take the one that deals the least amount of combined damage from reactions and terrain. And then villains can also take a special adjustment. Well, they'll sidestep if the shortest path is not moving at all. So like if they're already adjacent to somebody, and they can avoid the damage from terrain, and they keep their target in range and in vision. So to give an example here, villains that start their turn on lava and already in range 1 of their favorite target will likely be able to step away from the harmful terrain and avoid the damage from ending their turn on it. Yeah, so he won't just sit in the lava turn after turn if he can get out of it without getting out of range. But if he is stuck there and he can't move without losing the ability to attack his favorite target, he absolutely will just sit there and kind of soak it. So I think it sounds more complicated than it seems. It's actually just really like kind of common sense once you're actually in the implementation of it. They give you a ton of examples here, as you can see, and they're pretty good examples. They're well written, and they really try to capture some of the toughest possible examples. Like here's a good example here. If your enemy is here and he's trying to target this guy, how's he gonna move? Well, he's gonna take the shortest path. 1, 2 gets him to his target. Whereas if you went this way, 1, 2, 3, 4 would get him there without taking any lava damage, but he would take a reaction from this guy, and he's trying to avoid the reaction. And so what he ends up doing is he moves 1 here into the ice, and then he just moves 1 more into the lava. So he's slowed down by the ice, but not enough that he still can't get to his target, so he kind of doesn't care. And he's taking both the lava damage and the reaction damage because he has to do it in the shortest path possible. Yeah, so they talked about the Dark Surge. This guy is going to be, I assume, somebody who's going to do a Dark Surge. He's going to move, and then he's not going to be in range. And so what he'll do is he'll take 3 R damage, residual damage, to increase its move stat to 10. And then its favorite target becomes the closest hero this turn only. So they will abandon their logic if they're really far away from you. Yeah. And then they give you an optional rule here if you want to implement it, which is called survival instinct. Because these guys will kill themselves to get to you if that's the way the map is laid out. And they even tell you that if you really hate yourself, you can make the safest path the priority over the shortest path. And they say only do that if the idea of the AI being a little reckless really bothers you. But I think it's in character for enemies, and it doesn't bother me at all. So, couple notes: villains never get mob or focus. And whenever a villain forces a hero to move, he tries to do the most damage that he possibly can. So he's going to push you onto spikes and stuff, obviously. You can't just decide he's going to push you into thin air. Villains have passive powers with effects. They're handing out condition tokens just like anybody else. And then they go into the bosses. And we don't need to really worry about that right now because we are not going to be fighting a boss anytime soon. So that's it for Chapter 7. Like I said, it sounds more complicated than it is, and you'll see it live here in our playthrough. Chapter 8 is next. This is a really important one too. Like, again, this tutorial, the rule book, it's giving you good information. It's just it just reminds me of like a really great piece of software, like an incredible idea for a piece of software, and you go and you develop it, but you didn't do any UI or UX research, and so it's just a clunky, unusable mess. Like the idea, the underlying product is amazing, but it's just not user friendly. This is not a user friendly tutorial, is what I would say. That's how I would capture it. But taking you to round 8, rounds and reactions, this is where they're going to talk about the turn order and how rounds work. So basically, every time somebody activates, you're going to give them one of these black cubes, and that's going to represent that they're fatigued. Which is funny because I just kind of made up that rule myself in an earlier round just so I could track it, but that's how you're supposed to do it. Fatigued combatants cannot take turns. And so what you're going to see is this isn't like, I believe, Arena the Contest, where all the heroes would activate and then the enemies would activate. What's going to happen is you have the ability to provoke enemies by attacking them, and then they're going to immediately retaliate. They're not just going to wait until you kill them and they never get to attack. So it's a means of increasing the difficulty and the stakes, because you can't just kind of game the system to focus down a single target and never pay any consequences for it. They talk about guards here. There are no guards in this event that I know of. I'm not going to worry about that. But here you go, turn order, provoking villains. So if the heroes do not provoke any of the villains, then they go first. So they could take all their actions. If all I wanted to do was move around in this room, these 4 guys would go first, and then the bad guys would activate. But if you're activating and attacking and trying to get shit done, then you're going to provoke them. And so basically, when you make an attack on your prime action, the first non-fatigued villain you target must take the next turn. So they're only going to activate one time, no matter how many times they get attacked. Everybody gets 1 activation per turn. This is a little bit different than something like Arcadia Quest, where like the guards have like that reaction and they'll do it 10 times if people keep moving by them. These guys are only going to take their hits once. It just depends on your actions, whether they're going to do it of their own accord after the hero activation, or if they're going to interrupt and take a swipe at you for messing with them. Yeah, so the way it works is, again, say this is a hero. I'm attacking this guy. I'm the red hero. After my activation, he's going to activate, and he's going to attack me. Now, if this guy comes along and attacks him, he's not going to activate again. He's already activated. If these guys activate without them at all, then they will activate, and you get to decide what order they activate in. Pretty simple overall. And they talk about the unprovoked villains. If after all the heroes have acted, there are active villains who are not yet fatigued, those villains will not attack because they were provoked. They'll attack because they're ready to take their turn. This gives their attack damage an unprovoked bonus. So this is another kind of key element of the strategy, is if you try to game the system, if you try to be passive and trick enemies and only take one guy on at a time and trick enemies into kind of not being able to reach you and stuff, then they'll punish you for it with this unprovoked bonus. Yeah, if all the heroes are fatigued, any villains that are not fatigued and not on guard take turns in any order chosen by the players. These are the villains that were not provoked into retaliating this round. They are unprovoked. Unprovoked villains roll the die, and if their attack hits, it is considered a critical hit regardless of their natural roll. So they get +5 damage when they attack if they were unprovoked. If an unprovoked villain rolls a 20, there is no additional consequence. The attack still deals +5, so it's just +5 across the way. So that's really cool, actually, because that is a problem in these games. Hero Quest, like the most obvious example. You stack up at the door with your guy with the most armor, and you just trick these motherfuckers into coming into the door. You wipe them out, and then rinse and repeat. You know, you can kind of still do that in this game, but you're at least going to pay a price for it. And then they talk about reactions. We've kind of hit on this. I think it's automatic damage an enemy deals to the owner of a turn to punish its careless actions. It's incited by nearby movement or ranged attack. So basically, villains always are going to deal a reaction attack of 8 damage if you if you're within one of them and you just declare a move action, so you're going to move away from them, or you declare a ranged attack. So if I'm here and I want to attack him there with a ranged attack, then I have to deal with the fact that I'm like ignoring this guy. He doesn't like that. He gets pissed off, and so he does his reaction damage. It's pretty much just it on that. They give you a kind of a diagram here. I'm not really sure that this diagram is super useful. I don't know what this is supposed to mean, but you could see it here. If black attacks white with a ranged attack, white retaliates. Melee attacks never incite reaction. This is really important because there are melee attacks that have more than one square. So you gotta bear that in mind too. And that's it for chapter 8. Moving on, we're gonna be looking at chapter 12, step 3, fight. We're almost done. Chapter 12, step 3. See, this is very odd. I don't know. Some of this stuff I'm seeing for the first time, but it's also like initial setup. Classic. All right, step 3, fight. You've read the quest features and map. The board is assembled. After checking whether cubes, facts, or the Kemet hut impact the beginning of the quest, the journal will instruct you to take the quest first turn. Most of what happens during combat is explained in part 1 of this rulebook. Yep. Next, we'll talk about the 3 most frequent and most important situations that happen during a quest: death, end of round, and events. When a villain dies, remove its figure and its HP token from the board, then put both on its card. When a hero dies, remove its figure from the grid, put its HP token on the square the figure occupied. This is the hero's square of death. Combatants may freely occupy and step on this square. Attacks that target a dead combatant must consider that the dead combatant is on this square for the purposes of range and vision. Dead combatants cannot heal, and all active effects on them. Effects applied by a dead combatant remain as if it lived. So, for example, if you're blessed and you apply a temporary curse on an enemy, when you die, your blessed goes away, but he's still cursed. Makes sense. While dead, a hero continues to gain mana cubes, but they cannot be spent. Oh, we got an awesome picture of some kind of badass baron. Gusteg Redfield Noble. First aid. Heroes that drop to 0 HP are dead for the combat around them, but not dead for good, because a revive effect like first aid, you start with 2, can put them back on their feet. I don't think we really need to dive into this until it comes up. Just a couple of quick notes. So basically, at the start of a dead hero's turn, you have to revive them with the first aid token. You can't decide not to. If you win a quest with a dead hero and 2 first aid tokens spent, you don't lose the quest automatically, only when that dead hero's turn comes. If you accomplish the primary objective before the hero's turn needs to start, you win the quest. That hero is considered to have been rescued and saved. That makes sense. This is just telling you dead heroes, you can make them go last in terms of hero activations, but their activation does start before the villain's does. And you can't spend a first aid token to revive a hero outside of that hero's turn. End of round. When all active combatants are fatigued, skim through the quest instructions and look for the following symbols. R. Apply its instructions effects in the order these symbols appear in the quest guide. Then all combatants lose their fatigue and a new round begins. Events. If the situation described in the initial setup must significantly change before you can accomplish the primary objective, new villains and sometimes even features will appear in events. The quest guide always mentions what must happen before a new event can start. We've seen that already. I'm not gonna worry about the rest of that. Okay, that is it for the current amount of reading required prior to starting event 1, which means now we get to start event 1. Amazing gameplay. Hashtag gameplay. I'm such an asshole. Alrighty. So our succubus Yemi, she activated in the previous, sequence of events. She finished off the orb, and so now I've got and so did the brute, and so now it's just the healer. And wait, did the brute? I don't think he did. He did not. I do not believe he activated. So now we've got our enemies, and we've got 3 out of our 4 characters who can start us off. And let's see here. So we've got the red guy, the Violent Reaper, powerful size 17, damage, targets the hero with the most HP. So he's pretty straightforward and not all that dangerous to my mind. Enraging Scythe on the Guardian, targets the hero with the most mana, does 14 damage plus the effect. The villain with the highest HP gains 1 empowered token. So he buffs his other guys, so probably would behoove us to deal with him first. But this is where it gets really interesting, because it's all about like order of operations and how I game this out to my benefit, to my most beneficial outcome. So I'm going to start with, let's see what we got over here. So Sword of Sigils, Vitality Sword, Bone Destruction, Dimensional Strike. Benefit, you move 2, ignoring terrains. Okay, that's actually really interesting. Sword of Sigils. I don't think I want to start there. Can Nyx hit the baddie from where she is? Definitely. All right, Nyx is going to start us off with a ranged attack and try to draw this Guardian in. Nyx's passive, Hope, trigger if an ally is within 3 of you. On the first hit of your turn, you deal +5 damage. Okay, so if her hit is successful, she will deal an extra 5 damage on it. And so next we decide, do we want to use just our basic attack? I'm not going to move her, so she'll focus. So she's going to be +3 to her to hit roll. Effects move 3 an ally. Interesting. He's going to target the one with the most mana, which is a tie. So he's just going to target the closest person. He's going to target the one with the most HP. I'm just going to start with Pew Pew. It's got a range of 8 squares, targets 1 enemy. If you forego your passive power, you get +3 to the attack roll. It deals 7 damage plus the effects. The effect deals 6 damage to an enemy. And you are hastened. I'm not gonna empower that. I don't need to. I'd rather get the 5 damage. So and let's really formalize this. Let's do this in terms of the action kind of order, which sadly I don't think is sufficiently captured there. I liked the way it was captured in the hero book more. The attack timeline, that's what I'm talking about. So she's declaring, she's targeting him. He's within 8. She gets the benefit or drawback, which she's electing not to use. Then she moves into the strike phase. She rolls a die, applies the modifiers, and so forth. All right, so she gets a 14. I was using their kind of fancy colored dice, but I'm just gonna set those aside. It takes a long time. She gets a 14, so she hits. She's doing, let's look at the order. The order is very specific. Strike hits. Roll equal or higher than the target's defense. Apply your passive power first. Once a turn. So, she's dealing 5 damage to that guy right off the bat. He started with 40. He's down to 35. And again, I've got all this stuff written down off to the side. Then she does her attack damage, which is 7 damage plus the effects. So that takes him down to 28 plus the effect. That takes her out of the final results phase or out of the strike phase and into the execution phase. Apply additional effects. At least one strike hit. Can apply your weapon's active power, which we can't do right now because those are still locked, and the attack card effect. The attack card effect being she deals 6 damage to an enemy. It just says an enemy. So it could be to him or to him. I'm gonna apply it to him because it's gonna show how the reactions work. So he started with 35, he's down to 29. And she becomes hastened. So she takes this card and she puts it on top of her player card to indicate that she's hastened. And that ends her activation. But now we move to the enemy reaction. I just provoked the green guy by attacking him. I did not provoke the red guy. He was affected by an effect of the initial attack. So he's the only one who actually gets provoked. And so he's immediately going to activate. So he's going to determine his target. Again, it's just most mana. There's a tie, so I will have him attack the brute. Now he's going to move 5. His attack is melee, so he has to move the whole way. And he is going to take the shortest path. So I don't think there's any way on that shortest path that he avoids taking 2 hits from the spikes. Although I do just want to make sure that they actually take multiple hits in a single turn. I heard somewhere that maybe they don't. Let's see. Once per turn. Lava and spikes, 4 damage once per turn. Okay, so it only counts as 1 hit anyways. So he's gonna move on the shortest path. He's gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4. Now he's, well, I guess he's actually in the doorway. That'll do. That's fine. 5. And so he immediately takes 4 damage from those spikes, which brings him down to 24. And now he activates. Raging Scythe, he's attacking for 14 plus the effect. So we do the same thing. He's declared his target. Now he moves to his strike phase, where he is trying to get better than a 6. He gets a 13. So strike phase is successful. He does 14 damage to the brute. Brute goes from 65 to 50, 54. Not the world's greatest at math. Using my camera, my phone to film, so don't make fun of me. It takes me a second to figure it out. I have an English literature degree, not a math degree. Although I work in IT, so figure that one out. Oh yeah, and then the effect goes into play. The villain with the highest, is it the villain with the highest HP? What is that fucking symbol? Yeah, villain. Villain with the highest HP gains 1 empowered 3 token. There's a tie between these two, and so I'm gonna say goes on the red guy, because he's closer. So now Nyx is exhausted, and he's exhausted, so he doesn't get to move again. And it comes back to me. So we'll go ahead and activate. And just to point it out, you know, like, I moved him through the spikes, but I didn't put him into a position where he really wasn't in a position where he could kind of be adjacent to somebody and take a reaction attack. But if I had the choice, I wouldn't, because they won't be willfully stupid. They just won't deviate from their shortest path. So we're gonna go ahead and activate our brute. What you can do, brute? So he's not going to do shipwreck blow because that has a kind of an AoE effect, but it's relatively short AoE. Zephyr Strike doesn't give him any bonus. Savage Weapon just does 13 damage. And Perfect Blow is range. So he's going to do Savage Blow. Savage Weapon. 1 square, 1 enemy, 13 damage. He's declaring that to be his target. His passive, no ally is within 1 of the target. First hit of your turn, so that is in play. Rolls his attack, and, you know, again, we'll just... I wish this whole detailed attack timeline was on its own document. Yeah, he's going through his declaration phase. There's no benefit or drawback. Let's go straight to the strike phase. He rolls a 7, which is higher than the 5 defense on the enemy, so he hits. His passive triggers first. No ally is within 1 of the target. First hit of your turn. You gain 1 mana, which I can't do because we can't gain mana right now, but I can move to an ally, and I will move her to... And now that's very interesting. First of all, that won't trigger retaliation because I'm not doing it on her turn. It's the effect of another card. But also, this guy is technically like standing right here, which means he's now flanked. But I don't know if that... That doesn't really mean anything because I already rolled But he will be flanked in future turns. He'll be mobbed, I should say. I say the word flanked, mobbed. Yeah, so I'm doing 13 damage to him, and that's basically it. A good bit of damage. That brings him down to 11 hit points. No, that wasn't her, that was him. He has already... He's already got a fatigued token on him, so he's not gonna do anything about the fact that I just attacked him. He just kind of eats it. So next up, I have a decision to make. Do I want to try to engage the other guy so that he doesn't become empowered, or whatever the term is for the bad guys? And there's a lot of terminology. I'm not an idiot. I mean, I understand what's going on here, but there's a lot of terminology. Right, so that he doesn't become unprovoked. So do I want to engage the second one to keep him from being unprovoked, or do I want to try to finish this one off entirely? It's a good question. To be careful, if I move her, she could initiate a reaction still from him. Because if she moves away from him, he'll still do that automatic damage. But she does have Dimensional Strike. 1 square, 1 enemy, you move 2, ignoring terrains. I could do that and move her, I don't know, and still attack him. I can't get far enough to get to him. Yeah, I don't think so. I know I need 11 damage. I'm gonna go with the Sword of Sigils. And I'm attacking guy Green Boy. Declaration. Benefit drawback, none. Strike. Looking for, in this case, I'm getting +3 to my roll because he is mobbed. So I got an 11. So I'm hitting, doing 11 damage plus the effects. So I do 11 damage, it takes him down to 0, but it doesn't actually leave the board yet because I don't know what these effects are. Maybe they let me manipulate them in some way. The effect is you are protected 3 once per turn. Protected. +3 to defense against enemies. Okay, that's awesome. So I'm gonna recognize that by putting this card there. An ally swaps place with an enemy if both are within 5 of you. Interesting. Oh, that's really interesting. 2, 3, 4. I could do that. Yeah, why not? So this is where it gets interesting though. What's his targeting priority? Hero with the most hit points. Oh, this could be really interesting. Yes. I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna swap these two. Yemi's gonna go there. He's gonna come here. she's... Oh, and I forgot her passive. At the start of your turn, there's at least one enemy within 2U. An enemy within 2U takes 5 damage. So he did... She overkilled that guy anyways. But that's it. So he dies. He goes away. That's it for our enemy, or for our hero activations. And now, it is time for these guys to activate. And they activate in whatever order we want them to. I'll start with the red one, because this is going to be super interesting. The red guy wants to target the person with the most hit points. Currently, the person with the most hit points is her. She has 65 hit points. He's been damaged, so he does not anymore. He has a melee attack, which means he's going to have to move to get to her, and he's going to have to take some reaction damage. So he needs to move here. And now we get to see a little more specifically exactly how the reactions work. You incite the reaction when it's your turn and you move. Oh, okay. So sidestep doesn't negate. Sidestep would avoid a reaction, at least right now, but it also wouldn't get him to where he needs to be. So he won't do it because he wants to get to his target. Shortest path before safest. So the question is, yeah, once per turn the first time it's incited. Only once in its turn. So he's gonna take reaction damage, but just the one time. So he's gonna go from there. I'll take the shortest path. So again, it's a little weird. I don't have my shit from Dragori. How about we just throw him up here? Yeah. Fuck you up, man. Although I guess, yeah, that'll work, right? But he's gonna take 8 reaction damage from the brute, just for moving, taking him down to 21 health. And then he's gonna do his powerful scythe ability. He's targeting her. He's rolling his die. He needs 6 or 7 or better. He gets a 3. So he misses, but he is empowered. So let's refresh our memory on what that does. Deal +3 attack damage, but his attack doesn't hit. So doesn't do any good, and he loses it. Bad turn for the bad guys. And next up, we've got the blue one. He's the last person this round to activate. He's got a movement of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Clearly is not going to get him within range, even though he does have a range of 2. So he is going to do his dark, what was it called? The dark compact or something. The dark surge, yeah. He's going to take 3 damage so that he can increase his move by 5. So he goes down, what's he got? He's got 35, so he's down to 32. Dark Surge. Oh, we didn't actually technically declare his target yet. His target is the furthest hero from him who is within range. So, you know, it might technically be her, but he has no chance in hell of reaching her. If he moves 10, 1, 2, 3, 10. The only one that he can reasonably get to is her, and so that becomes his target. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Just want to make sure that they Dark Surge and then they still finish their activation. It's a little unclear. Increase its move to 10, then its favorite target becomes closest here. Yeah, so it still does its attack. So he's attacking her. Poor old Yemi with his explosive scythe. It's got a range of 2, so he will take the shortest path, so he actually would have stopped there. He doesn't want to get up next to her if he doesn't have to. Targeting Yemi, 15 damage. Yemi's defense is 6. He rolls, is it a 6 or a 9? That's a 9. So he hits. He's doing 15 damage to Yemi, taking her down to 45. And he's triggering this effect. Blast, 6. Heroes within 1 range of the target take 6 damage. But there are no targets within 1 range. But also, I did forget, he is unprovoked. And so he does an additional 5 damage. And again, beautiful of them to put this on the goddamn card. That's what reminded me. Unprovoked. They did not have to do that. A lot of developers wouldn't do that. They would, it just would slip their mind, and they would expect people to just remember it, which is not an unfair expectation, but there's a lot going on, so yeah. And that's it. So all of our characters are fatigued. Pull all this stuff away. The red guy's gone. Bye-bye. No, the green guy's gone. The red guy's, he's very much still here. And it goes into the next round, starting with the heroes again. I don't believe there are any end of round effects. Yeah, the end of round effect is just if all the villains are dead, then you start the next turn. So now it comes back around to me, and this glorious puzzle of tactical combat continues. So we've got a guy trying to target the one with the most hit points, and we've got a guy trying to target the one who is furthest away. The red guy is closer to death, so we're gonna focus him down, I think. Remembering that if we do that, it will leave this guy empowered. So let's start with the bruiser. Anariel, the Sword Mage. She is protected. Ends at the start of Anariel's next turn. Okay, so that's interesting, actually. We actually don't want to start with her because that will remove her protection. We want to start with somebody else and then make this idiot attack her and have less of a chance of doing it. So we are going to start this time with the Brood again. Okay. The guy's adjacent to him. He's mobbed. He will not get his passive because there are allies within one of his target. You go with Perfect Blow. Gives him a +3 on the attack roll. Zipho Strike. Deal +3 per effect or token applied by enemies on you and allies. That's not in play right now. Or the Shipwreck Blow, which again we can't get the maximum use out of. Yeah, so I think he's going to do the Perfect Blow. 2 squares, 1 enemy, +3 to the attack roll, does 11 damage. He's declaring his target to be the Red Menace. No benefits, or, I mean, the benefit is the +3 to attack roll. He rolls a 19. Okay, this is interesting. So with the +3, he goes up to over 20. But there is a difference between criticals and natural criticals. And I just want to make sure. Let's see if that's called out here. Natural critical, so rolling a 20 gets you +5 to your damage. But I don't know that pushing yourself over 20 does. Natural 20 is always a hit and natural 1 is always a miss. Yeah, deal the attack damage. If you roll the natural 20, not only is the strike an automatic hit, but you may deal +5 attack damage. Yeah, it doesn't say anything about plus to your roll. So he just does his normal damage, which is 11. So he brings Red Reaper down to 10 hit points. And he has now used that ability. Now the Red Reaper activates. He's going to attack the target with the highest hit points, which is an Ariel. He's already adjacent to an Ariel, so he doesn't have to move, so we won't trigger another reaction. So he just goes straight for his attack. Powerful Sigh does 17 damage, but she is protected, so her defense is +3, making it a 10, so he has to roll a 10 or better. And he rolls a 4. So again, that guy whiffs. You lose, American ass. That's a Bloodsport quote. If anybody got that without me saying that, kudos. Okay. So next up, now that Anariel has soaked his attack, she'll go ahead and activate. That flips. She comes here. If at the start of your turn there is at least one enemy within 2 of you, an enemy within 2 of you takes 5 damage. So that's definitely going to come into play. She can do Vitality Sword, but she doesn't need to heal. She can do Bone Destruction. 11 damage plus effect. The target is weakened 3. That ain't gonna be necessary. Dimensional Strike, 1 square, 1 enemy. Yeah, I'm gonna do this again. I'm gonna do this one. Deal +2 damage per other combatant within 1 of you. Yeah. Okay. So Anariel is gonna do Dimensional Strike. She is targeting the red guy. The benefit is she gets to move 2, ignoring terrains. And so she's right next to him. And the reason she's doing that is to get within range of more of her allies for her Dimensional Strike. She rolls. The enemy is still mobbed. Or I should say exposed. -3 to defense. Yeah, so his defense is down to 2. She rolls a 1. Oh my god. Shite. She's not. She doesn't have anything that could make up for that. No. Oh, okay. She misses. So, and that outlines why the attack timeline is important. Because you apply those benefits and drawbacks first. So she got to move because that happens here. In the strike phase, she missed, and so she doesn't get to apply the passive power. Although hers actually does still trigger. At the start of your turn, if there is at least 1 enemy within 2 of you, an enemy within 2 of you takes 5 damage. So she actually should have done that at the start of her turn. So he does take 5 damage from that. But all the rest of this stuff goes away. Damn it. Okay. And that brings him down to 5 hit points. And again, he already activated, so nothing going on there. Next up, let's go with Nyx. So Nyx was hastened. Temporarily ends at the next start of Nyx's next turn. So that goes away. Her hastened goes away. And she's in here. Trigger, if an ally is within 3 of you on the first hit of your turn. You could do a Holy Ray, healing a hero for 7. Yeah, that would not be a bad idea. Life Tithe, move 3 an ally, choose 1. You or an ally heal 6, or both of you heal 4. And she would get to move. And the blue guy is going for the furthest target within range. Yeah, I think I'm gonna do Life Tithe. I'm gonna try and set this Joker up for some reaction damage. 8 squares, 1 enemy, 7 damage, plus effects. So, and she's dealing, if she hits, she deals plus 5 damage, which she doesn't actually need. She rolls a 15. She was targeting the red guy, obviously, who was still mobbed, but it doesn't apply because this is a ranged attack. So she does 7 damage to Big Red and kills him. But before we remove him, we kind of finish everything else off. Yeah, so the effects activate. Effects, move 3 an ally. So I'm gonna move this big boy. 1, 2, 3. This is kind of a mess. I'll go ahead and pull him off now. Yeah. And then you or an ally heals 6, or both of you heal 4. So the wording here is a little vague. It doesn't say that you have to have like vision and line of sight. I'm assuming you do. She still does to the person I want to heal, which is her. So she's going to heal her for 6, bringing her back up to 46. And that is it for her turn. And Life Tithe goes away. Now our friendly neighborhood succubus is up. She hasn't used any of her abilities yet. She's going to get to wreak some havoc. Blood petals. 11 damage. You get to move the target, and if you rolled an even natural, the target is bleeding. Moving the target, that could be interesting. I don't want to do that, because I want him to go for Nyx. So if I moved him here, he would have to do his Dark Surge to move, which a movement of 10, target the closest hero, he would actually just come to her. I'm not gonna do that. Fatal Kiss hits 2 enemies, which I don't have. Cursed Bolt, 8 squares, 1 enemy, 10 damage plus effect, target is cursed. That sounds good, let's do that. The Cursed Bolt. All right, declare your target. Also, I could have moved Nyx, but I don't want to, because I don't want to set this guy up for failure. Target. Trigger is target is within 4 of you on the first hit of your turn. A hero charges 2 skill tokens. And the question is, does that trigger still work, even though... Yeah, I'll forego it for now in this initial run through. Okay, so target in blue, defense of 5. She will focus. a little inconsistent on what they list here. I'm just trying to remember what focus does. I think it doesn't actually affect you, it affects your enemy. It's the same as mobbed. It makes them yeah, they're exposed. That exposed is -3 to defense. Yeah, so that guy's down to 2 defense. She rolls an 8. Attack hits, doing 10 damage, getting him down to 22. Her passive kind of can't do anything right now. The effect of the attack is the target is cursed once per turn. Cursed targets roll twice and choose the worst results. So we're gonna put that there. She is activated. Now he activates and he is not unprovoked. So he's gonna target. He's looking for the furthest target within range. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That makes his target Nyx. So he's gonna move on the shortest path. And the shortest path there is gonna be, yeah, he's gonna take some spike damage, because you take spike damage if you cross like this too, and the same with all the other terrains. They affect you if you cross them diagonally. So he's gonna go 1. Yeah, there's no getting around it. 2, which means he takes reaction damage from her to the tune of 7, getting him down to 15. Plus he takes 4 damage from the spikes, taking him down to 11. And then 3, 4. He can't get to her, right? Yeah, because he has a range of 2. Yeah. I love this 3D stuff. It's a little janky for this particular use case. Back up on top. He does this ranged attack. 2 range. He is cursed, so he rolls twice. Takes the lowest amount. He rolled a 1, so he misses. Fail. Doesn't get his hit, doesn't get his effects. And we really worked that guy over. All right, that's it for that round. In the next playthrough, we will move on to the next round, and that's it for now. Hope you're enjoying this.